During holiday dinner, father called me worthless. Morning after, I departed, and terminated $2,000 monthly support. Having you here with me makes all the difference. Watch until the end and let me know where you're watching from, I'm really curious. I never thought a single evening could change everything. But there I was, at my father's 60th birthday dinner, surrounded by family, when my entire world collapsed. The Riverside Country Club gleamed with its usual opulence: crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in pressed uniforms. Dad had insisted on hosting his celebration here, despite the cost. He always cared more about appearances than practicality. A toast to Richard. My uncle raised his glass. 60 years young and still the life of the party. Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled politely, though my stomach was in knots. These gatherings always made me anxious. I was constantly walking on eggshells around my father. So, Kimberly, my Aunt Margaret turned to me after the toast died down. Still at that marketing company? Are you managing any big accounts yet? Before I could answer, my father let out a dismissive snort. Kimberly? Managing accounts? That'll be the day. I felt my cheeks burn. I'm actually leading 3 client teams now, I said quietly. Dad swirled his bourbon, not even looking at me. Playing on your computer all day isn't exactly what I'd call leadership. A heavy silence fell over our section of the table. My mother stared intensely at her plate. My younger brother Alex smirked. Richard, my mother finally murmured. Not tonight. What? He spread his hands. Am I supposed to pretend I'm proud that my 28-year-old daughter has accomplished nothing? Look at Jennifer, he nodded toward my cousin across the table. Started her own business at 25, just bought her second investment property. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. Even she looked embarrassed for me. Dad, that's not fair, I started. Fair? His voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. You know what's not fair? Raising a child, paying for college, and ending up with a useless daughter who can't even match her cousin's success. The word sliced through me. Useless. Nobody spoke up. Not my mother. Not Alex. Not any of the aunts or uncles who'd watched me grow up. Just uncomfortable glances and the sudden intense interest in the lobster bisque. What none of them knew, not even my father, was that I'd been the one keeping our family afloat for the past 3 years. When Dad's construction business started failing, I stepped in. $2,000 every month from my useless marketing job, directly into their account. I paid their mortgage when the bank threatened foreclosure. I covered Alex's car insurance. I even funded this extravagant birthday dinner Dad insisted on having. And there he was, calling me useless in front of everyone who mattered. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply excused myself to the bathroom, where I stared at my reflection under the harsh fluorescent lights. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? I whispered. My phone buzzed. A banking notification. Your scheduled transfer of $2,000 to account ending in 4732 will process tomorrow. 3 years. 36 transfers. $72,000. And for what? To be called useless by the man I was supporting? I returned to the table just as the cake arrived. Everyone sang. I moved my lips without making a sound. Dad beamed as he blew out the candles, accepting congratulations and back slaps. Best dad in the world. Alex declared, raising another toast. Mom nodded along, her smile never reaching her eyes. She'd become an expert at pretending everything was fine. When dessert was finished, I slipped out while everyone was saying goodbyes. The cool night air hit my face as I walked to my car. For the first time in years, I felt something crystallize within me. I knew what I had to do. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and logged into my banking app. The scheduled transfer glowed on the screen. $2,000, just like every month for the past 3 years. My finger hovered over the cancel button. Images flashed through my mind, Dad calling me useless. Alex's smirk. Mom's silent complicity. 3 years of transfers. 3 years of supporting a family that saw me as nothing. I pressed cancel. Then I went further and removed the recurring payment completely. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. Tomorrow, I would pack my essentials. I'd find a new place, maybe in another city. I'd finally start living for myself. For the first time in years, I felt something that had been missing for so long, the stirring of my own dignity awakening from its long slumber. The price would be high, cutting ties with my family, stepping into an uncertain future alone. But as I lay in bed that night, one thought kept repeating in my mind: my dignity was worth more than $2,000 a month. It was worth more than their approval. And tomorrow, I was going to prove it. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., before my alarm even had a chance to go off. Sleep had been impossible, my mind racing with the weight of my decision. I'd spent most of the night making lists, checking my finances, and researching apartments in Denver, 235 miles away from the life I was leaving behind. The first thing I did was check my banking app. The scheduled transfer had been successfully canceled. For the first time in 3 years, my parents wouldn't be receiving my money. The thought made my stomach twist with both anxiety and relief. I packed methodically, surprising myself with how little I actually wanted to take. Clothes, personal documents, a few photographs, not of family gatherings but of trips I'd taken with friends, and my grandmother's quilt. Everything else could stay behind. By 7 a.m., my car was loaded. I took one final look around my apartment, then dropped my keys in the building manager's mailbox along with a note explaining I wouldn't be renewing my lease. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. Mom. Morning, sweetheart. I just wanted to check on you after last night. Your father had a bit too much to drink. You know how he gets. The familiar excuse. Dad's behavior was always blamed on something else: alcohol, stress, having a bad day. Never on him. I'm fine, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Good, good. Listen, I noticed the transfer didn't come through this morning. Is everything okay with your account? Your father's already asking about it. Of course he was. Not, how is Kimberly feeling after I humiliated her, but where's the money? There's no transfer coming, Mom. My voice was steadier than I expected. Not today, not next month. I'm done. Silence on the other end. Then, what do you mean, done? Kimberly, we're counting on that money. Your father's business. Dad's business has been failing for 3 years, I cut in. And for 3 years, I've been keeping you afloat while he calls me useless and treats me like a disappointment. He doesn't mean it, you know that. It's just his way. It's emotional abuse, Mom. And you enable it. You all do. Another long pause. Where are you right now? I'm leaving. I've given up my apartment. I'm starting over somewhere else. Kimberly. Her voice shifted from placating to panicked. You can't just leave. What about the mortgage payment? What about your brother's insurance? What about me, Mom? My voice finally cracked. Has anyone in this family ever asked what I need? What I want? She had no answer for that. I have to go, I said. I'll text you when I get settled, but I need space right now. I ended the call before she could respond. Within seconds, my phone lit up again. Dad. I declined the call. Then another. Alex. Declined. The text messages started flooding in. Dad, call me immediately, young lady. This is unacceptable. Alex, WTF Kim? Mom says you're cutting us off. Not cool. Dad again, your mother is crying. Is that what you wanted? To make your mother cry? The guilt trip. Right on schedule. I pulled into a gas station and turned off my phone. The silence was immediate and jarring. For the first time in years, I couldn't be reached, couldn't be guilt, couldn't be manipulated into meeting their needs while neglecting my own. As I continued driving toward Denver, memories surfaced that I'd long suppressed. Dad criticizing my college major because it wasn't practical, like business or law. Mom standing by silently when he belittled my first apartment for being shabby. Alex laughing when Dad mocked my first-year salary. Yet when Dad's construction company started losing contracts and their financial situation became precarious, I was the first person they called. And I'd stepped up, transferring money each month without complaint, believing I was being the good daughter, the responsible one. What did it get me? Useless. The words still echoed in my ears. By the time I reached Denver that evening, I had 3 voice messages and 17 unread texts. I checked into a budget hotel and finally turned my phone back on to find an email from my mother. Kimberly, I don't know what's gotten into you. Your father may be harsh sometimes, but we're family. Family supports each other. What about everything we've done for you? Your education? Your upbringing? Is this how you repay us? By abandoning us when we need you most? Please reconsider. At least call us back. Classic manipulation. Reframe their emotional abuse as being harsh. Ignore years of financial support from me. Make me the villain for finally establishing boundaries. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for apartment listings. Tomorrow I would start viewing places. Tomorrow, I would begin building a life where my worth wasn't determined by how useful I could be to others. That night, in my anonymous hotel room, I cried, not from sadness but from relief. The burden I'd been carrying was set down at last. Yes, there would be hard days ahead. Yes, the guilt would try to creep back in. But for now, in this moment, I felt lighter than I had in years. Free from expectations I could never meet. Free from criticism that was never constructive. Free from the endless giving that left me empty. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something. This wasn't just a departure from my family. It was a return to myself. 3 weeks into my new life in Denver, and the storm back home was intensifying. I sat on the floor of my sparsely furnished apartment, surrounded by moving boxes I still hadn't unpacked. The morning sunlight streamed through bare windows. I hadn't bothered with curtains yet. My new place was smaller than my old one, but it was mine. No strings attached. No obligations. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on after a week of blessed silence, buzzed incessantly. I'd created a separate folder for my family's messages, keeping them contained like a virus I didn't want spreading to the rest of my life. Out of morbid curiosity, I opened it. Dad, yesterday, the mortgage payment is past due. I assume this childish tantrum of yours will end soon. Mom, yesterday, please call us, Kimberly. Your father is very stressed about the finances. We need to talk. Alex, this morning, they're taking my car. Thanks a lot, Kim. I should have felt something, guilt, remorse, concern. Instead, I felt oddly detached, as if reading about strangers' problems. Was this what freedom felt like? Or was I just numb? The most recent message was from Mom, sent just an hour ago. The bank called. We have 2 weeks before they start foreclosure proceedings. Please, Kimberly. We're your family. Family. The word had lost its meaning. Or rather, it had revealed its true meaning in their eyes, a one-way street of obligation flowing solely in their direction. I set my phone down and continued unpacking books onto my new IKEA shelf. I'd found a decent job at a marketing firm here in Denver. The pay was about the same as my old position, but without $2,000 being siphoned off each month, I suddenly had breathing room in my budget for the first time in years. My phone rang. Mom again. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately played the message. Kimberly. Her voice was shaking. I don't know if you're getting our messages, but things are bad here. Your father, she lowered her voice to a whisper. He's not handling this well. He had to ask your uncle for a loan, and you know how he feels about owing people money. Alex had to drop 2 classes because we can't afford the tuition this semester. Please, honey. Just call us back. We can work something out. Work something out. As if this were a business negotiation. As if they were offering a compromise rather than expecting me to resume my role as their personal ATM. I deleted the message. That evening, as I microwaved a frozen dinner in my new kitchen, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Local area code. Curious, I answered. Hello, is this Kimberly? A man's voice, deep and professional. Yes, who's this? This is James Porter, from Denver Marketing Group. We met during your interview last week? My new boss. I straightened up, even though he couldn't see me. Yes, of course. Is everything okay with my start date? Actually, that's why I'm calling. Our creative director just put in her 2 weeks' notice, and we're in a bind with the Johnson campaign. I know you're not supposed to start until next Monday, but I was wondering if you might be available to come in tomorrow? We could really use your expertise, and honestly, it would make a great impression on the team. An opportunity. A real one, based on my skills rather than obligation or guilt. I'd be happy to, I replied, surprising myself with my enthusiasm. What time do you need me? After setting the details, I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, valued. James had called because he believed I had something to offer, not because he wanted to take something from me. My momentary happiness was interrupted by another call. Alex. I almost declined it out of habit, but something made me answer. What do you want, Alex? Nice way to greet your brother, he snapped. I just lost my car because of you. Because of me? Or because Dad used your car payment to cover something else after 3 years of mismanaging money? Silence. Then, you don't understand. It's been chaos here since you left. Dad's drinking more. Mom's stress migraines are back. They're fighting all the time. For a moment, guilt began to seep in, the familiar, toxic guilt that had kept me tethered to them for years. Then I remembered my father's voice at the birthday dinner. Useless. The word that had finally broken the spell. I'm sorry you're dealing with that, Alex. I truly am. But I'm not responsible for fixing it. But you can, he insisted. You have the money. You've always had the money. Just because Dad said something stupid at his birthday. It wasn't just his birthday, I cut in. It's been my entire life. The criticism, the comparisons, the constant message that I'm not enough, while simultaneously being expected to sacrifice for everyone else. So, what? You're punishing all of us because Dad hurt your feelings? His dismissive tone told me everything I needed to know. He saw me the same way they did, as a resource, not a person. I'm not punishing anyone, Alex. I'm finally taking care of myself. Something I should have done years ago. Whatever helps you sleep at night, he scoffed. Just know that you're destroying this family. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, his words echoing in my head. Was I destroying the family? Or was I simply refusing to continue sacrificing myself to maintain their illusion of stability? As I looked around my small apartment, sparse but mine, I realized something important. The guilt I'd been waiting for, the crushing remorse that Alex had tried to trigger, wasn't coming. Not because I was heartless, but because I was finally listening to my own heart. Tomorrow, I would start my new job. Tomorrow, I would take another step into this unfamiliar but promising life. And for the first time in years, tomorrow wasn't mortgaged to someone else's needs. 6 months had passed since I left home. 6 months of building a new life, one that belonged to me alone. I'd been promoted at Denver Marketing Group after successfully saving the Johnson campaign. I'd made friends who knew nothing about my past. I'd even started dating Morgan, a graphic designer who respected my boundaries and never made me feel like I was only valuable for what I could provide. Then the call came that changed everything. Kimberly? It's Aunt Susan. Her voice was tight with worry. It's your grandmother. She's in the hospital. My heart sank. Grandma Ellen was the only person in my family who had ever truly seen me, who had encouraged my independence even as my parents tried to mold me into someone I wasn't. What happened? I gripped the phone, already moving toward my closet to pack. Heart attack. They've stabilized her, but it's serious, Kim. She's asking for you. I didn't hesitate. I'll be there tonight. 5 hours later, I was pulling into the hospital parking lot in my hometown. The familiar skyline felt like a photograph from someone else's life, recognizable but disconnected from my reality. As I walked through the automatic doors of Memorial Hospital, anxiety tightened my chest. I wasn't just visiting my grandmother, I was stepping back into the web I'd fought so hard to escape. The elevator ride to the cardiac unit gave me time to prepare myself. I hadn't spoken to my parents in months. Our last interaction had been a terse email exchange where my father demanded money and I refused. Would they be here? How would they react? How would I? Room 412. I took a deep breath and knocked softly before entering. Grandma Ellen looked smaller than I remembered, pale against the white hospital sheets. The monitor beside her beeped steadily, a reassuring rhythm in the quiet room. To my relief, she was alone. Kimberly? Her eyes fluttered open, and a weak smile spread across her face. You came. I rushed to her side, taking her fragile hand in mine. Of course I came. You scared me half to death. It takes more than a little heart attack to get rid of me, she chuckled, then winced. Though I must admit, this one gave me a run for my money. I stayed with her for over an hour, carefully avoiding the topic of my parents. We talked about my new job, my apartment, Morgan. She listened intently, occasionally squeezing my hand when I shared something that made me smile. You look happy, she finally said. Truly happy. Not the pretend kind I've seen too often on your face. Tears welled in my eyes. I am happy. For the first time in a long time. She nodded, satisfaction evident in her tired eyes. Good. That's all I ever wanted for you. To live your life, not theirs. A noise at the door made me turn. My mother stood in the doorway, a coffee cup clutched in her hand, her expression a mixture of surprise and uncertainty. Kimberly, she said, as if confirming I was really there. You came. Aunt Susan called me. I stood, instinctively putting distance between us. How are you, Mom? She looked older than she had 6 months ago. Lines of stress framed her mouth and eyes, and her clothes hung loose on her frame, suggesting she'd lost weight. I've been better, she admitted, setting her coffee down. It's been a difficult few months. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled only by the beeping of Grandma's heart monitor. Your father and Alex are in the cafeteria, she finally said. They'll be up soon. My stomach clenched. I wasn't ready to face my father yet, wasn't prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Perhaps you two should talk, Grandma Ellen suggested, her voice stronger than it had any right to be. I could use a nap anyway. Mom nodded and gestured to the small waiting area down the hall. I followed her, my heart hammering against my ribs. We sat in molded plastic chairs facing each other, the fluorescent lights highlighting every line of strain on my mother's face. The house is gone, she said without preamble. We couldn't keep up with the payments. We're in a 2-bedroom apartment now. I absorbed this information without comment. Part of me had expected it, given the financial situation I'd left behind. Alex dropped out of college. He's working at the warehouse with your father. She twisted her wedding band, a nervous habit she'd had for as long as I could remember. Things have been difficult. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want them to suffer. I just refused to sacrifice my own well-being for theirs anymore. Mom looked at me directly for the first time. Was it really that bad, Kimberly? Was it so terrible that you had to disappear without a word? The question caught me off guard. Not accusatory, as I'd expected, but genuinely confused, as if she truly couldn't understand what had driven me away. "Do you remember Dad's birthday dinner?" I asked quietly. She nodded, looking down. "He'd had too much to drink. You know how he gets." "That's the problem, Mom. Everyone always excuses his behavior. That's just how he is. He doesn't mean it. But he does mean it. He meant it when he called me useless in front of our entire family. He meant it every time he compared me unfavorably to everyone else. And you." I paused, steadying my voice. "You never once defended me." "I tried to keep the peace," she whispered. "Keeping the peace meant sacrificing me. And I just couldn't do it anymore. Not while sending $2,000 every month to keep you all afloat." Her head snapped up. "You think we don't know what we lost when you left? Your father may be too proud to admit it, but I'm not. We depended on you too much. We took you for granted." I blinked, stunned by the admission. It was more self-awareness than my mother had ever shown. Before I could respond, I spotted my father and Alex stepping off the elevator. Dad saw me immediately, his stride faltering before he straightened his shoulders and continued toward us. Alex trailed behind, his expression unreadable. The moment of reckoning had arrived. 6 months of silence, 6 months of rebuilding my life, and now I was facing the man whose words had finally broken the chains of obligation. As he approached, I stood up, determined to meet him as an equal, not as the daughter desperate for approval, but as the woman who had finally found her worth outside of his estimation. "Kimberly," he said, his voice gruff. "Your grandmother will be glad you're here." Not, "I'm glad you're here." Not, "We've missed you." Just a deflection to Grandma Ellen. Some things never change. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice 6 months ago. But as I looked at my assembled family, diminished, struggling, but here, I also realized something else. The next choice I made would define not just my future, but all of ours. The hospital waiting room felt like a courtroom, sterile, tense, with everyone awaiting judgment. My father stood before me, his once commanding presence diminished by months of financial hardship. His clothes, always impeccably pressed before, looked worn. The designer watch he'd prized was conspicuously absent from his wrist. "You look well," he said stiffly, his eyes taking in my professional attire, the subtle highlights in my hair, the confidence in my posture. "I am well," I replied, not bothering to return the observation. We both knew he wasn't. Alex hovered nearby, hands shoved in the pockets of jeans that had seen better days. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like embarrassment. "We should sit," Mom suggested, gesturing to the cluster of chairs. "Your grandmother needs her rest." We arranged ourselves awkwardly, Mom and Dad on one side, Alex and me on the other. The physical divide seemed appropriate for the emotional chasm between us. "How long are you staying?" Dad finally asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "As long as Grandma needs me," I answered. "I took a week off work, but I can extend if necessary." "You got a new job?" This from Alex, surprise evident in his voice. "Yes. Senior marketing strategist at Denver Marketing Group." "Sounds fancy," he muttered. I didn't bother explaining my recent promotion or the raise that came with it. They didn't need to know that without the burden of supporting them, I'd been able to excel professionally. "Kimberly," my father began, his voice strained as if each word cost him. "Your mother tells me you believe that I didn't appreciate what you were doing for the family." I raised an eyebrow. Was this his version of an apology? "You called me useless, Dad. In front of everyone. While I was sending you $2,000 every month to keep the lights on." He flinched. I was having a bad day. And I'd had too much to drink. "You've been having a bad day my entire life. And alcohol doesn't create feelings, it just removes the filter that normally keeps them hidden." My mother made a small, distressed sound. Alex stared at the floor. "What do you want from me, Kimberly?" My father spread his hands. "You want me to beg?" Fine. We need your help. Is that what you wanted to hear? The old Kimberly would have caved at those words, would have rushed to solve their problems at the expense of her own well-being. But I wasn't that person anymore. No, Dad. That's not what I want. I want you to acknowledge how you've treated me. I want you to understand that I'm not your personal bank. I want you to see me as your daughter, not as a resource to be exploited. Exploited, he sputtered. We're family. Family helps each other. When was the last time any of you helped me? I asked quietly. When I got promoted at my old job, Mom asked if it meant I could increase my monthly transfers. When I was sick with pneumonia last winter, none of you visited because Alex had a football game. When I needed emotional support, I got criticism instead. That's not fair, Alex interjected. We didn't know you were sending money. I turned to him. You didn't know because you never asked. None of you ever asked about my life, my struggles, my successes. I was invisible until you needed something from me. Mom was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. Dad looked stunned, as if the thought that I might have needs had never occurred to him. We're struggling, Kimberly, he said, his voice softer now. The house, Alex's education, everything's falling apart. I know, I said. And I'm sorry that you're going through that. But I can't be your solution anymore. So that's it? Dad's voice hardened again. You're just going to abandon your family when we need you most? I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the familiar wave of guilt. I didn't abandon you. I freed myself from a relationship that was destroying me. There's a difference. Seems like semantics to me, Alex muttered. Of course it does, I replied. Because none of you have ever had to set boundaries. You've always taken, and I've always given. But that dynamic was killing me slowly, and I refused to go back to it. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Sinclair is asking for Richard, she announced. My father stood, clearly relieved to escape the conversation. As he walked away, Mom reached across the space between us and touched my hand. We do love you, Kimberly, she said softly. We didn't know how to show it properly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just my enabler mother, but a woman who had been trapped in her own toxic patterns for decades. Love isn't supposed to drain you, Mom. It's supposed to lift you up. She nodded, more tears falling. I know that now. Too late, maybe, but I know it. Alex shifted uncomfortably beside me. For what it's worth, he said, avoiding my eyes, I've been working at the warehouse with Dad for 4 months now. It's the first time I've ever seen how hard it is to actually earn money. He paused. I never thanked you. For the car insurance, the tuition, all of it. His words surprised me. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, something I'd never received from any of them before. Thank you for saying that, I replied. I'm not asking you to start sending money again, he continued. But, we miss you. Even Dad, though he'd never admit it. Before I could respond, my father returned, his face ashen. Your grandmother wants to see all of us, he said. Now. Something in his tone sent a chill through me. We rose as one and followed him down the corridor to Grandma Ellen's room. She was sitting up, looking remarkably alert for someone who just had a heart attack. Ah, good. All of you together, she said, her voice stronger than before. It's time we had a family meeting. None of us realized then that Grandma Ellen was about to change everything, that the confrontation we just had was only the beginning. 1 year. That's how long it had been since Grandma Ellen's heart attack. That's how long it had been since everything changed. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting the simple silver necklace that had been a gift from Morgan on our 6-month anniversary. Today was important, the first family dinner since I'd left. Not at their apartment, but at a neutral location, a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. My suggestion, my terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Morgan, "You've got this. Call me after if you need me." I smiled, grateful for his understanding. I'd told him everything about my family, about the financial support I'd provided, about the birthday dinner that broke me. He'd never judged, never pushed, just supported my decisions and held me when the guilt threatened to overwhelm me. As I drove to the restaurant, I reflected on the year that had passed. After Grandma Ellen called us all into her hospital room that day, none of us could have predicted what would happen next. "I've been watching this family fall apart for too long," she had said, her voice surprisingly firm for someone recovering from a heart attack. "Richard, you've spent your entire life trying to prove your worth through material success, and when that failed, you took it out on your daughter instead of facing your own shortcomings." Dad had stared at her, mouth agape. None of us had ever heard Grandma Ellen speak so directly. "Margaret," she continued, turning to my mother, "you've enabled his behavior, sacrificing Kimberly's well-being to keep a false peace. And Alex, you've followed their example, treating your sister as a resource rather than a person deserving of respect." Then she had turned to me, her eyes softening. "And Kimberly, my brave girl. You did what none of us had the courage to do, you broke the cycle. But there's a difference between setting boundaries and cutting ties completely. Real strength isn't in walking away, it's in staying engaged on your own terms." From her bedside table, she'd pulled out a folder and handed it to my father. "This is my new will. I've made some changes you should all be aware of." The document stated that Grandma Ellen's modest savings would be divided equally between Dad and me, with a condition. Dad would receive his half only if he completed a full year of weekly therapy sessions focusing on his controlling behavior and emotional abuse. If he refused or quit, his portion would go to a charity supporting victims of financial abuse. My half would be placed in a trust that I could access in 1 year, giving me time to decide if I wanted to use it to further my own life or to help my family in whatever way I deemed appropriate, with no obligation to do so. "You're all adults," Grandma had concluded. "I can't force you to heal this family. But I can create conditions that might encourage it." The months that followed were difficult. Dad had initially refused the therapy, calling it New Age nonsense. But as the reality of their financial situation continued to deteriorate, he'd eventually relented. To everyone's surprise, including his own, the sessions seemed to be helping. Our phone conversations, once tense and filled with unspoken resentments, gradually became more honest. Not comfortable, but honest, which was a start. Mom had found a part-time job at a local bookstore, her first employment in over 20 years. The modest income wasn't enough to solve their financial problems, but it gave her something she'd never had before: independence. Alex had eventually returned to community college, studying business with a new appreciation for the value of hard work and money. He'd even apologized to me, a real apology, not the half-acknowledgement in the hospital waiting room. And me? I had continued building my life in Denver. My promotion had led to greater responsibilities and recognition. Morgan and I were discussing moving in together. I'd started therapy myself, working through the lingering effects of years of emotional manipulation. The restaurant came into view. I parked, took a deep breath, and checked my reflection one last time in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who had fled town a year and a half ago, stronger, calmer, more centered in her own worth. Inside, they were already seated at a corner table. Mom waved when she saw me, a tentative smile on her face. Dad stood, awkward but making the effort. Alex nodded, a genuine welcome in his eyes. "You came," Mom said as I sat down. I said I would. I unfolded my napkin, placing it carefully on my lap. I keep my promises. The unspoken message wasn't lost on any of them. "You look well," Dad said, the same words he'd used in the hospital, but the tone was different, sincere rather than stiff. "Thank you. How are the therapy sessions going?" A year ago, he would have bristled at the direct question. Today, he simply nodded. "Dr. Myers says I'm making progress. It's not easy to face certain truths about yourself." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." The waiter came, and we ordered drinks. When he left, an awkward silence fell over the table. "I got an A on my accounting final," Alex finally offered. That's great, I replied, genuinely pleased for him. How many more credits until you finish? 36. I'm working part-time at the warehouse still, so it's slow going, but I'll get there. Mom added, the bookstore promoted me to assistant manager last month. It's not much more money, but I enjoy the responsibility. I smiled at her, recognizing the pride in her voice, the same pride I'd always craved but never received from her. Kimberly, Dad began, setting down his water glass. There's something I need to say to you. He took a deep breath. I was wrong. Not just at that birthday dinner, but for years before that. I treated you like an extension of myself rather than as your own person. When my business was failing, I resented your success because it highlighted my failure. And when you were supporting us financially, I couldn't face what that meant about me as a father, as a provider. I blinked, stunned by the admission. I'm not asking for money, he continued. I'm not asking for forgiveness, either, at least not yet. I haven't earned that. But I am asking for a chance to try to be the father you deserved all along. Tears pricked at my eyes. Not because his words magically healed everything, they didn't. The hurt was too deep, the patterns too ingrained for such a simple resolution. But because for the first time in my life, my father was seeing me, really seeing me, and acknowledging his role in our broken relationship. I'd like that, I said softly. It won't be easy, and there will be setbacks. But I'd like to try. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Alex gave me a small, hopeful smile. The waiter returned with our drinks, and Dad raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. And to Kimberly, who had the courage to show us all a better way. We clinked glasses, and as I took a sip of my wine, I realized something profound. The price of dignity hadn't been losing my family after all. It had been refusing to accept anything less than what I deserved from them, and in doing so, creating the possibility for something healthier, something real. The healing had only just begun. There would be difficult conversations ahead, old patterns to break, new boundaries to establish. But for the first time, I wasn't facing it alone. And for the first time, I wasn't sacrificing myself to maintain a false peace. That night, as I drove back to my hotel, I called Morgan to share the details of the dinner. After I finished telling him everything, he was quiet for a moment. You know what I'm hearing? He finally asked. Growth. On all sides. That's rare, Kim. It is, I agreed. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't left. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, he said. You gave them the opportunity to become better versions of themselves, and you gave yourself the same gift. As I ended the call, I thought about Grandma Ellen, now fully recovered and probably waiting by her phone for my report on the dinner. She had been right all along. Real strength wasn't in walking away completely, it was in staying engaged on my own terms, in refusing to accept relationships that diminished rather than enhanced my life. The dignity I had fought so hard to reclaim wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about creating space for all of us to grow into the people we were meant to be, flawed, struggling, but finally, truly seeing each other.